Hey everyone, today I'm here to tell you everything you can possibly want to know about every emblem in the game, including the spoiler ones. You've been warned. The emblems will go in order, so if you want to avoid spoilers, I recommend not watching any of them past the ones you've already got. But if you want some ideas for builds, maybe a few quirks you didn't know about, or you just want to hear which emblems are better than the others, stick around, it's going to be a wild ride. First, let's explain how emblem skills work. There are 4 different types of emblem skills. Emblem attacks can only be used once and play a cool cutscene when you use them. Most of them deal damage to an enemy, and when they do, they cannot crit, always hit, but can activate skills like Luna, Soul, Ignis, or Sandstorm. Then we have engage skills. Engage skills activate automatically upon engaging with your ring, such as Sigurd's movement increase. These are effectively passives that you get access to for all 3 of your engaged turns, but lose access to when you aren't engaged. Third, we have sync skills. These skills are always active as long as an emblem is equipped, and allow you to gain the benefits even when you aren't engaged. You may also notice that you get stat buffs when a ring is equipped, and these do not increase when you are engaged. So it's good to think about both these stats and skills when thinking about how a unit will function before engaging. Finally, we have inheritable skills. Many skills, such as stat buffs like Lynn's speed +5, are only available as inheritable skills. This means you only get access to them if you spend SP and allow them in one of your 2 inheritable skill slots. Other inheritable skills are actually sync skills when the ring is equipped, but you can inherit them in order to get access to the skill without the ring, such as Sigurd's Canter. If you're having trouble remembering which skills you always have and which are inheritable, you can check the emblem inheritance in the ring vault. All of your inheritable skills are listed here, with inheritable skills that are also sync skills noted by the red text telling you that they will overlap if the emblem is equipped. I've seen people say that all the skills you get upon increasing your bond level are only inheritable, and that's not true. For example, Marth's break defense is gained at bond level 3, but it is a sync skill. The game doesn't tell you when you raise your bond that break defense is sync skill, but his avoid skills are only inheritable. And so I've seen a lot of players confused by this, and I wanted to make sure everyone understands how that works. So let's jump into it. We'll start with Marth, the OG Hero King. Marth is decent as an emblem, but a little lackluster overall. His primary passive ability is Divine Speed, which gives units an additional attack at half damage. Having a second attack or third attack if you're already doubling can obviously increase a unit's damage output pretty significantly, allowing them to sure up kills. At Bond 3, Marth gets Break Defense, giving him another additional attack at half damage if he breaks his foe. So basically, the philosophy behind Marth is hit them until they stop moving. This means that Marth is generally much stronger if he's on a unit that can crit a lot, or has skills like Luna that are activation-based. Skills that you want to go off a bunch of times in a single round of combat are all much more powerful on Marth because he'll hit a bunch even if those hits are a little weaker normally. But Marth also has a lot of abilities that improve his bond unit's longevity. Unyielding comes in 3 tiers and restores part of a unit's HP when it falls below a certain threshold. But more importantly, he gains several levels of Avoid up to Avoid plus 30, those are only available as inheritable skills. 30 Avoid is more than you can get from most terrain features, just to put it in perspective, and will of course stack with any other Avoid buffs you have. In a game where an enemy can break you and stop your counterattacking even if you're only dealing 1 damage, Avoid tanking is actually looking really nice in comparison to defense tanking, at least on hard difficult. You also get Perceptive, which increases your Avoid on player phase by another 15, with the bonus increasing the higher your unit's speed is. I can't find anywhere in the game or documentation that says exactly how much of a speed bonus you get, but I ran this on my allier and most enemies had a 0% hit rate on player phase and around a 20% hit rate on enemy phase, so it seemed like it was dropping their hit pretty significantly. Then again, Avoid on player phase isn't nearly as useful, so I'm still not sure Perceptive is worth a skill slot for inheriting purposes. All emblem rings get synergies with specific types of units as well. Lodestar Rush is kind of a lackluster emblem attack, dealing 7 strikes at 30%, which is just barely more than double damage, and not always worth it if you can double the enemy and then get Marth's extra attack in. But when equipped to a dragon unit like Allier or a backup blue unit like Boucheron, you get extra hits during this attack. 2 more for dragons, and 1 more for backup units, which significantly increases your damage dealt and makes the attacks more worthwhile. Mystical units will also find that Lodestar Rush deals magic damage, even when it is performed with a sword. Marth's extra attacks with Divine Speed also applies poison when used with a covert unit. I think poison in this game is probably the best it's ever been in a Fire Emblem game, which means it still isn't that good. It's really only good in boss fights, and knife-wielding covert units already poison on attack anyways, so this bonus only really applies to archers. Dragon units, however, get a big buff from Divine Speed, getting their HP attack whenever they hit its special attack. This helps Allier out a lot early game, though by the end game, you'll probably be one-rounding and not needing the extra attack, which means no extra health either, making it a little too inconsistent to run as a tanking build. The main drawback to Marth is that he's a sword emblem in a world full of them, and offers no other proficiency types. On top of that, his rapier and falchion are both covered by Lucina, who's just a much better ring in general. Lucina's rapier does have a little more might than Marth's, but her falchion has a little less. The only thing he's really giving your team long-term that you can't get elsewhere is his avoid skills, which are pretty expensive to inherit, costing 4,500 SP for the maximum level. Marth's also just best on units who aren't able to consistently kill in 2 hits already, and if they're not able to consistently kill in 2 hits already, the unit's probably just not doing very good. There's definitely a few situations where Marth's helping and nobody else can get the kill, but a lot of the time it's better just to use a stronger unit. I also feel like Marth's main benefits are on high critical units and units with activation skills, and that just kind of narrows down which people he can be equipped to. He's not an emblem you can just stick on anybody and they'll automatically be good. Overall, I'd call Marth a C tier emblem. Up next, the Emblem of the Holy Knight, Sigurd. Sigurd's main benefit is his movement buff, as he's able to place your units practically anywhere you want them to be on many maps. On engaging, he activates Gallop, which allows Sigurd to move an additional 5 spaces. Dragons get an extra space, and Cavalry get an extra 2 spaces. Since most units move as 5 already, this effectively doubles your movement range, allowing you to reach time-sensitive objectives more easily. Covert units, on the other hand, do not have to pay movement costs when using Sigurd's ring, allowing them to move through forests and other terrain features as if they weren't there at all. Sigurd also gives you Canter, the artist formerly known as Canto. Canter allows you to move 2 more spaces after acting, and is inheritable, for some reason. Everyone in the army wants Canter, so I encourage you to horse Sigurd around a bit. You can move away and disengage after attacking, making sure other units can secure a kill. You can use it to keep moving further, since Canter will always give you 2 more moves, even if you've already moved your maximum distance. And it's easy to proc, as simple actions like eating a vulnerary will cause it to go off. Your support units like healers and dancers also love having access to Canter just as much as your main team. Sigurd's emblem attack, Override, is probably the most lackluster part of his kit. Your unit will move through the enemy units, attacking each one until he arrives on the other side. There's no cap to how many units you can hit if they're all standing in a line. The problem is they all have to be standing in a line. Engage has a lot of more open maps and rarely uses single tile choke points, which makes it hard for enemies to line up correctly. And when it works, it can often leave you alone and stranded on the other side of a group of enemies. Therefore, it's best used only when Sigurd can secure the kill and run back to the group with Canter. Dragon units, following the usual trend, make that easier, as they cause the attack to do an extra 20% damage. That is 20% damage on each opponent. However, armored units get an interesting advantage, having a 10% chance to break the enemy as the unit passes through them, and Qui Adepts up this chance to 20%. It's a little too low of a proc rate for me, but this break would occur regardless of the weapon type you're using, which definitely has potential even as a single target attack. Mystical units deal extra damage based on 25% of their magic stat, so if their magic is high enough, this is probably the most damage you can get out of Override, but of course they also need to have high enough physical since they're going to be attacking with a lance. So when it comes to inheritable skills, besides Canter of course, Sigurd has a lot of things that help his kit, but aren't universally useful on everyone. His hit bonuses are okay, but they're probably not worth the 2,500 SP in a game with backup units that always get 80% hit rates, unless those Wolf Knights are really getting on your nerves. Lance power drops Avoid for attack, which could be useful on Lance armors, but isn't good on units that use multiple weapon types or need the Avoid. Momentum increases your damage for every space you travel through. which is really good when you have Sigurd's extra movement range, but is only okay as an inheritable skill. When it comes to weapons, Sigurd is doing okay. The Rider's Bane is useful early game, but it won't be too long before you can get your own Rider's Bane, and it's much cheaper to forge yours than it is to augment Sigurd's. Sigurd's Brave Lance is a little harder to get on your own and much more expensive to forge, but Brave weapons just aren't that good in this game anyways, so you might not see much use in it. Tearfing is a meme. Like, sure, its stats are decent, but plus 5 res is pretty lackluster compared to a lot of the other swords that other emblems are getting. Nonetheless, I'm calling Sigurd an A-tier emblem. With the mobility he's giving you, it's really only a matter of finding units tanky enough to hold their own against your enemies for him to excel. He has a unique use case that nobody else is able to meet, and Cantor means he's one of your most important inheritance emblems as well. Not being sword-based doesn't hurt either. Next up is Celica, and Celica's pretty strong. Her emblem attack, Warp Ragnarok, allows her to warp up to 10 spaces and deal pretty effective damage. It's great for sniping thieves or airdropping your units into the middle of all the enemies, and has a larger base range than warp stabs while not costing you any units to use. When paired with a dragon, Warp Ragnarok can actually hit from 3 tiles away, giving you some leniency from where you want to place your unit. Cavalry units, on the other hand, get an extra 2 warp distance, and flying units get a whole 5 more tiles of warp distance, which is insane actually. Finally, mystical units deal an extra 20% damage, allowing them to be an effective nuke. But Celica's real strength comes from her weapons, most notably Seraphim. Seraphim is a spell with pretty good stats, it falls off a little bit late game, that also deal effective damage on Corrupted. Since like 80% of the game has you fighting Corrupted, this effective damage is usually pretty brutal on enemy forces. And just like other engaged weapons, units who can't normally use magic can still use Seraphim. So you can warp Ragnarok and armor unit to the other side of the map, and then fight everyone with their 1-2 range magic attack on enemy phase. Thanks to Celica's ring giving plus 5 to magic at max bond, you don't really need more than 10 to 12 magic to use Celica effectively. A lot of physical units that can get at least passable magic can fix it up by huffing some spirit dust. I genuinely think this ring is being underutilized by most players on physical units who have the defenses to tank physical enemies and just enough magic to deal out some pretty strong attacks. It's worth looking into. Celica's Echo skill is another really powerful attack. Echo allows you to damage multiple enemies for 50% damage, basically letting you split those Seraphims into 2 to pick off weaker opponents. It's great crowd control or cleanup after other emblems like Ike launch some of their AoE attacks, and definitely not something you want to just forget about. When Celica is on a dragon unit, Echo can also make your magic hit from 3 away, and when on a mystical unit, Echo boosts an extra 10% damage, so 60% of your normal damage per attack. Both of these synergies actually make Echo useful even when you only want to target a single enemy. Celica's other weapons are Recover and Ragnarok. Ragnarok is a fire spell that does lots of damage, previously seen in Warp Ragnarok. It's good, doesn't offer any interesting utility. Recover is a staff that heals a unit and doesn't break, so it's sort of nice to save you money, but you also can't use it while you aren't engaged, so it's kind of just okay. Her inheritable skills are a mixed bag. Fully Stance requires you to take hits to work, and only activates on Corrupted, which feels too situational, though it is our only real counter effect in the game. So that's Resonance gives you a raw damage boost in exchange for your life, which is a pretty good trade. Favorite Food is a great way to get extra engage attacks in skirmishes or Tempest Trials, where you don't get any blue rings of engage energy. But during normal levels where there's enough engage energy to go around, it's not that great. Tome Precision gives you both hit and avoid when equipped with a tome up to 15 at max level for 2000 SP. I'm really curious if it's enough avoid for a unit like Yunaka to dodge tank. On one hand, Corrin's Fog gives you more avoid and doesn't need to be engaged for it, but on the other hand, Yunaka might be dealing a lot of damage back using tomes instead of knives. Which brings me to her last inheritable skill, Magic plus 5. So on top of the 5 magic you get from equipping the ring, you can grab another 5 magic from Inheritance 2, though the 5000 SP price point is a bit too rich for my blood. Honestly, I think Celica is an A tier. It might be a little too high, but she's your only offensive magic ring, and so a lot of units that want her, there's no real competition for other rings. Maybe Sigurd for movement, but Warp Ragnarok lets her keep up with that. And then on top of that, I really don't think she's limited to just magic units, though those probably use her most easily, and you probably don't want to take her off of your magic units. I think she could really open up some options for offensive magic for other units if you wanted to experiment. And then we have Micaiah, the leader of the Dawn Brigade. I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. We all already know Micaiah is S tier. How could she not be? The main benefit she's bringing to the party is Cleric, a skill that allows anyone to use staves regardless of their class. This effect starts at C rank and rises to A rank with high enough bonds. Not only can she make anyone a healer, but when you engage with her, Augment increases staff range by 5 and area of effect by 1. The area of effect bonus is the biggest deal. Want to heal a whole group of units standing together? Boom, you've got an AoE heal now. Want to use an obstruct staff to make an impassable wall? Boom, you've got that. Want to warp your entire army to the other end of the field? Done. The possibilities are endless, and this is one of the craziest toys in your sandbox that you have access to. Dragon units increase staff range by 1 square further, which is always nice, though it doesn't increase that AoE, which is what you really want. And Qui Adept units increase healing by 20%, which is cool if you're using this for AoE heals, but I think there's just so much more than that you can use it for. Next, we have her Engage attack, Great Sacrifice. This fully heals all your units and sets your HP at 1. It also gives like a crazy amount of experience for some reason, so it's great for leveling up a weaker unit. This ability lets you go absolutely crazy on player phase, dishing out damage with no regard for the damage you take, because you'll just heal it up at the end of the turn anyways. Dragon units retain 30% of their HP instead of being brought down to 1 HP, which is ultimately completely irrelevant, since you should never be clicking Great Sacrifice while in range of an enemy. Armored units grant 1 point of defense to each healed unit, which is nice, but you have to be healed for it to apply, so you better make sure you get your units hurt if you want the buff, and at the end of the day, it is only 1 point. Qui Adept units can cure status with Great Sacrifice, which is genuinely useful, as I find myself wishing Sacrifice cured status constantly when I use it on other units. Micaiah has pretty strong weapons too. Shine is the weakest, but it still lights up dark spaces, which is convenient on Fog of War levels. Nosferatu recovers HP equal to half of your damage dealt. I haven't tried Nosferatu tanking this game yet. It feels like you'd want Tome Precision Celica and maybe a few other buffs to make it work, and that's a lot of SP grinding. But I'm sure it's at least possible, as Nosferatu seems to have decent accuracy in this game. Lastly, Micaiah gets Thani, a tome that deals effective damage to armors. Most tomes already one-shot armor units, so like with Seraphim, non-magic units can probably still pick up kills through the effective damage. I mean, look, you're watching my Seadoll pick up kills with this damn thing. And hey, if you like seeing big number, stick this on your highest magic unit and go find a horse to bully. When it comes to inheritance skills, Micaiah lets you grab Res plus 5 for 2000 SP, which feels like a reasonable price for a skill most tanks in this game will find extremely valuable, since most tanks in this game seem to hate magic. Staff Mastery makes your staves heal more and makes them more accurate, which is good, but I don't think it's worth inheriting. On the other hand, Healing Light is a must-have skill for your healers, as it allows your units to heal themselves whenever they heal an ally. As you can see, Micaiah excels at almost every front. Her abilities are powerful, she inherits good things, she fits a unique niche that no one else does. Hell, she even grants some hard-to-get proficiencies with tomes, knives, and staves. Plus, since her role is support-oriented and works with staves, any unit can use her well, and their stats barely even matter, which means you can make whatever absolute trash can of a unit that happens to be your favorite work with her. She's S-rank for a reason. Next, our boy, Roy. I think he's a lot more powerful than people are giving him credit for. His primary attack, Blazing Lion, attacks 3 squares in front of him and places 2 more squares down the line. It should be noted that only the 3 units in front of Roy take direct damage. Dragon units increase the attack range, while mystical units get an increased fire area. The reason I think Roy is actually better than most people think is because flames are a lot more powerful than most people. Take a look at the movement range before and after I put up the flames. Both you and the enemy cannot move as far through fire, getting cut off after moving 1 tile into it. This means you can use Roy to slow down enemy movement and control how your units are attacked. Roy's Sync skill, Holdout, is given automatically when equipped and is also inheritable. It allows Roy to survive lethal attacks with 1 HP. Max level, this thing goes off so long as the unit has more than 1 HP. This means that Roy bonded units can tank 1 more hit than usual, allowing them to frontline more effectively and engage in riskier combat. It's a really good skill that can help any unit you want on the front, provided you don't need the slot for something else. The engage skill, Rise Up, increases your unit levels by 5 when you engage. Dragon units are given 6 levels, cavalry an extra move along with their 5 levels, and armor units get 5 more max HP. I'm really not sure how this works entirely. My unit is shown 5 levels higher, and seems to get some stats as if they gained 5 levels, but I have questions. Are the stat gains fixed or random? Do they take into account stat caps? I couldn't find any real documentation on it. I did a little bit of testing and it seems random, but I definitely want to know more about how that works. There might be some really gamey stuff you can do with it once we know exactly how the game calculates those 5 levels. Roy's last inheritable skill, Advance, allows the unit to move 1 space further before attacking. I definitely don't think this skill is worth inheriting, though the low price of 500 SP is kind of good just because you don't really need it. 1 more space is nice, but only being able to use it after you attack someone limits you, as you can't use it as a way to just move through maps faster unless there's an enemy in front of you. For weapons, Roy gets swords, but his Lance Reaver weapon is nice as it gives him an advantage against lances, allowing him to utilize more of the weapon triangle than most sword lords. The Wyvern Slayer gives Roy advantage against dragons. Since class-changed flying enemies are split between griffins and dragons, Roy doesn't get as much anti-flyer mileage as a good bow gets, but this does give him nice coverage against the big, scary, corrupted Wyvern enemies. Overall, pretty nice. Lastly, he gets the Binding Blade, which is one of the strongest sacred weapons. He gets plus 5 defense and res, and the sword can attack at 2 away. Eat your heart out, Tear Thing. For stat boost, Roy gets Sword Power, which increases damage with swords at the cost of avoid. Great for sword armors and other units who aren't avoiding anyways, and Strength plus 6 for 6,000 is a nice all-purpose physical damage boost if you can swing the cost. He also grants a Strength, Res, and HP boost when equipped, which makes him work really well on tanks, especially tanks who want the Res boost. Overall, I'd call him a B-tier emblem. He's stronger than someone like Marth or the other low-tier emblems, but weaker than the Celica or Sigurds of the world. Next up we have Leif, the Ring of the Sage Lord. Leif's best advantage actually comes from his stat boost rather than his skills. He gives build buffs up to 5 points on equip, with some points in defense and HP for good measure, and can inherit another 5 build through skills for only 2,000 SP. Build is an overlooked but important stat. If your build isn't high enough, you get a speed penalty when using weapons that are heavier. That's why 2 units with identical speed and the same weapons might not be doubling as often as you want, or may even be getting doubled. Of course, unlike speed, it's not a comparative stat. It doesn't matter how high the enemy's build is for enemy combat calculations, which means as long as you cross the threshold of not having a build penalty, any extra build is worthless. This means the units Leif is good on is limited to units with low build, or for helping units mid-game get their build high enough to function without him. At the same time, Leif is the only way to get build buffs, as there are no stat boosters for build the way there are with other stats. That makes Leif incredibly valuable to a lot of units. Leif's sync skill, Arm Shield, allows him to take 7 less damage when he has weapon advantage. That pairs well with his engaged skill, Adaptable, which always pulls out the best weapon before an enemy fight. The problem is, Adaptable is really bad at picking your actual best weapon. He loves to, for example, use Leif's Light Brand to counter a 2-range mage, which unfortunately is a magic-based weapon. The game doesn't seem to actually calculate how much damage you take and give during combat when picking a weapon. It just picks based on arbitrary rules like has weapon triangle advantage or counters from 2 range, and often uses its weapons inoptimally. Having weapon triangle advantage doesn't even do that much on enemy phase since you can't break enemies on defense. So it's honestly a pretty small defense buff that often makes you use weapons that are offensively really weak. Still, the right unit could use this okay. For synergies, Adaptable grants dragon units plus 30 hit, which is fine, but not that exciting. It gives backup units plus 10 crit, which pairs nicely with Leif's Killer Axe or other killer weapons you may have if Leif decides to use them on defense. Covert units get an extra 20 Avoid, which seems like it could honestly be useful for stacking Avoid, especially since most covert units are using bows or knives and don't interact with the weapon triangle. and so having all of Leif's weapons is nice for them too. Armored units get an extra 5 defense, and flying units get an extra 5 res to round things out. Leif's emblem attack is quadruple hit, where Leif attacks with all 4 weapons: axe, lance, sword, and bow. Honestly, this attack is pretty versatile. It can break all 3 primary weapon types, and the last hit does effective damage for flyers. It does use Leif's weapons for all 4 attacks though, and not any of the weapons in your inventory, so you can't scale the damage up as much as you can with something like Lodestar Rush. I honestly still think it's a little better when it comes to multi-hit moves than Lodestar Rush though, because all 4 hits do hit at full damage, and you can break any enemy, you get effective damage on flyers. I think it's a little better. Being a dragon gives you an extra 20% damage, and being a Qui Adept guarantees you break the enemy no matter what. But honestly, the biggest advantage is on covert units, who have a chance of getting 1,000 gold from the enemy based on their luck. Only being on this one attack doesn't make it the best way to get gold, but in an economy as tight as Engage's, I'll take any money I can get. Leif rounds off his kit with Vantage, a skill that allows you to attack first even on the enemy phase, which can be inherited for 2,000 SP. Vantage has always been good in Fire Emblem, allowing you to occasionally kill enemies before they attack you, which synergizes well with Leif's enemy phase gameplay. I do, however, think that because Adaptable doesn't seem to care about offense when switching weapons, it can make it harder to clean up kills with Vantage, so I like Vantage better before I engage than after. Leif's final inheritable skill is Knife Precision, which grants hit and avoid when wielding a knife. Definitely great for avoid stacking on knife units. I have no idea why Leif gets this one, when none of the weapons he uses are knives. Leif gets 3 engaged weapons, all of which allow him to use a different part of the weapon triangle. His Killer Axe allows him to crit more frequently, which is nice, but it's a bit of a basic weapon and easy to get and forge on your own. The Master Lance is a Brave Lance that can attack at 2 range, which is really strong for clearing up enemy mages on player phase, though it should be noted the Brave effect doesn't work on enemy phase, so this weapon is kind of weak when Leif tries to defend with it, and usually he switches to Light Brand for no reason. Speaking of, the Light Brand deals magic damage and gives Leif 10 extra luck and can attack at 1 to 2 range. If your unit is targeting a low-res enemy or has naturally high magic, this is a great option to use, but since swords are the only weapon class that doesn't have a physical 1 to 2 range weapon normally, this weapon doesn't fix the problem with ranged swords, and units who can use this well can also use 11 sword or something similar. It should be noted that Leif also gives you access to every single weapon proficiency, which means a unit with a max Leif bond can second seal into any class they can possibly want, except for tome classes and art classes. This makes him very useful for getting access to some of the harder weapon types, such as anything that isn't swords. Overall, I have to put Leif in C rank. Like Marth, most of the good things on his kit are inheritable, and when it comes to usefulness as an engage ring, both of them are outclassed at doing their jobs. Leif sounds good at enemy phasing on paper. There are ultimately other tank-based emblems that are much better than it. I would say that in C rank, Marth is actually above Leif too. I want to talk about the OG GBA Lord next, Lyn. Lyn is probably your best emblem if your unit needs extra speed, giving +5 speed on equip and having access to speed +5 as an inheritable skill. She also allows you to inherit the sync skill Speed Taker, which grants 2 speed after every kill on enemy phase, up to a maximum of 10 speed. She takes advantage of all that speed through the inheritable skill Alacrity. At max level, Alacrity performs any follow-up attack, commonly referred to as doubling, before the enemy gets to attack. It says you need at least 5 more speed, but you need a 5 speed advantage to double anyway, so it's effectively anytime you double. Being able to get both hits in before the enemy can counter you lets you pick up so many kills without having to worry about damage that you would take. And with all the possible speed boosts, even mid-tier speed units can double pretty reliably with Lyn's help. This alone would make Lyn very potent, but we haven't even gotten to her engage bonuses. Her engage attack, Aster Storm, is really strong for taking out specific threats like mages or ballista. She launches 5 attacks at 30% damage, meaning she's dealing 150% damage. That isn't the benefit though. That's less damage than doubling an enemy. The benefit is that you can hit up to 10 tiles away with it, allowing you to snipe enemies before they ever get near you. Dragon units increase that range by a further 5, while covert units increase that range by another 10 for 20 range, which is on most maps basically anywhere. You probably want this on an archer anyways, as the attack uses bows and being able to use stronger forged bows keeps the damage high enough to one-shot during the late game. It's worth noting that a Qui Adept unit always breaks the foe when using this, which I guess could be useful on a hard to break enemy, but honestly, why break when you can kill? Lyn also gets access to the sync skill called Doubles, which allows her to call forth up to 4 doubles of herself in the tiles around her. If your unit is a dragon, you get 5 doubles in a kind of awkward configuration, and if you are a flying unit, your doubles get an extra 10 avoid. Doubles can be really strong defensively, as most enemies love to attack doubles over your own units. I have no idea if the AI is still this dumb on maddening, but from what I've seen on the internet, I'd say probably, as they seem to treat these doubles as if you had an actual 1 HP unit on the field, and value getting an easy 1-hit KO over teaming up to kill someone with more of their units. But this ability is also really strong offensively. Each double joins in as a backup unit when the unit with Lyn attacks, granting you 4 free backup attacks. Backup damage in this game is always 10% of the enemy's HP, regardless of their defense, and always has an 80% hit rate regardless of their avoid, making this a reliable way to take out 40% of a tanky enemy's health, 50% if you're a dragon. So the ability has a lot of uses both offensively and defensively. The only problem I have with it is it totally uses up your turn. Since the doubles are placed surrounding Lyn, there's no way to get in there and dance her afterward, which sometimes limits its offensive usefulness. When it comes to weapons, Lyn's first one is a killer bow. Like Leif's killer axe, it's a good weapon that can crit often, but it's easy to get on your own and cheaper to forge one than to augment Lyn's, so it falls off. You also get the Mani Caddy, which is just a rapier with a different name, giving effective bonuses on cavalry and armor. It's great considering Lyn's kit, and the doubles end up using it really well, but it's a weapon with effectiveness a lot of other emblems are given access to. Her final weapon, Molgir, is actually a decently high might bow, which also grants +5 speed. Once a unit gets access to this, they can use it for much higher damage on Astrostorm, assuming they don't have bow access on their class normally. Speaking of, Lyn gives access to bow proficiency for class changing, as well as, to no one's surprise, swords. Overall, I'm going to stick Lyn in the A tier. While I think she's an amazing combat unit emblem, she can change a lot of units into player phase death machines, I don't think her utility with illusionary doubles is as strong as some of the S tier emblems are. I feel like she's right on par with Sigurd in terms of usefulness. Next is Lucina, the Lord who saved the series. Prom fans in shambles yet again, Lucina is definitely a strong ring in this game, mostly for how she helps out with backup damage. Dual Strike makes any unit Lucina is equipped to deal backup damage. It's great when paired with archers and longbows or mages with thunder to get backup damage from 3 away, but honestly, everyone uses this well because everyone would rather be a backup unit than whatever class they are normally, and this lets them have the best of both worlds. On top of that, she gets dual assist, which allows any unit who can chain attack do so as long as they could reach the tile where the enemy is, though only with a 70% activation rate. Since Lucina allows everyone to chain attack, the stipulation that the unit must be able to perform a chain attack is only relevant when inheriting the skill. But when it comes to skill inheritance, every backup unit in your army wants dual assist, and at 2000 SP the cost isn't really even that bad. Once your army starts really making use of these long-range chain attacks, the game starts to feel very different, and a 70% activation rate isn't too awful, though we should note, it still only has an 80% hit rate after that 70% activation rate. Lucina's emblem attack, All for One, allows her to have everyone within 2 squares of her perform a chain attack on an enemy, even if they aren't normally backup units or in range. This works really well against bosses when you've likely got the enemy surrounded. Dragon units set the hit rates for these chain attacks at 100% instead of 80, which is a really nice buff, while backup units let everyone 3 spaces away instead of 2 join in on the attack, which greatly improves your positioning versatility. However, I often find this attack doesn't do as much damage as attacking and doubling an enemy unless I take a long time to set it up. Lucina also gets the engaged skill Bonded Shield. This is similar to the Queadept's Chain Guard, except you can spam it every single turn you're engaged to protect all of your allies without taking any damage yourself, and it can activate multiple times per turn. In return, it only has an 80% chance to work, unlike Chain Guard's 100% activation rate. But 80% is pretty damn high, and dragon units bump this up to 90%. Armor, cavalry, and flying all bump this up to 100%, but only for units of the same type. Queadepts, on the other hand, get a 100% activation rate no matter what. With that 100% activation rate, your unit is practically invincible. Just make sure you're fast enough to not get doubled and watch out for enemy backup units. Since backup damage is a guaranteed 10% of your health regardless of your damage output, Queadepts can still use Lucina's other skills just as well as anyone else too. spamming dual guard with them for 3 to 4 turns is honestly one of the easiest ways to get through any of the game's challenges. The weakest part of Lucina's kit are her inheritables. Bow agility just isn't very good because no one is giving up offensive crit power on a bow just to dodge more. Your bow unit shouldn't need to dodge in the first place unless you misplayed, and dexterity +5 is really not something you're going to run on anyone. Her weapons are also just okay. She has the rapier and falchion just like Marth's. She also gets to add in her bow, Parthia, which gives res +5. With the added bow, she can do effective damage on armor, flying, cavalry, and dragons, which is basically everything that can take effective damage, so that's nice. But giving you every weapon Marth gives on an emblem with much stronger utility is why Marth's so low, not necessarily something that's going to make Lucina any higher. That being said, she can't get much higher, because I'm giving Lucina an S tier. Bonded Shield is easily the best defensive skill in the game, allowing many normally not tanky units to survive entire armies. A lot of people have debated that Lynn's doubles are stronger, but if a couple of them die on a turn, you have to dispel them and then call new ones next turn, so you can't really spam it the same way you can Lucina's Bonded Shield. Though, honestly, I think guarding a double is actually really strong, as it makes sure everyone attacks your invincible 1 HP unit. So they synergize really well together rather than competing against each other. It's just, for the fun tier list, we have to decide which one's better. Lucina's ability to make anyone a backup unit and allow backup units to attack from further away also really helped push her into S tier, as I think she's able to give you consistent damage that ignores all enemy defense pretty handily, and that really shouldn't be discounted. She works really well with heroes running Brave Assist and is one of the few emblems whose passive lets her contribute a shit ton without having to use engaged turns. Next, we have Ike. I like Ike. He's a beefy guy, giving pretty big buffs to a unit's defense, HP, and strength on equip. When engaged, Legu's friend grants a 50% damage reduction, which helps your unit stick around even longer, though he loses the ability to dodge for it. A dragon unit reduces damage by a further 10%. He also gets Resolve as an inheritable sync skill, which gives him 7 more defense and res when he is below 75% HP, which is really not even that much damage. He also gets defense +5 as an inheritable skill in case all those defense buffs weren't enough for you. But if you really needed to tank an entire army, Ike can activate his Engage Attack Great Ether. This gives him another 5 defense and 5 extra res for good measure, and can be activated with an axe or sword. Great Ether spends the first turn winding up, while Ike tanks every hit you can send at him and is unable to counterattack. And on the next turn, you deal damage to every enemy within 2 spaces of Ike, which is basically everyone who attacked him. It actually makes him really strong as an enemy phase unit because if an enemy would normally break Ike, it doesn't matter. He isn't counterattacking anyways, and he will deal his damage when the attack activates next turn. He's also healed 30% of the damage he dealt, allowing him to go right back up into tip-top shape after all those mean guys hit him. Dragon units deal 1 extra point of damage per unit who hit them, making the offensive ability of this move even higher. Armor units get an extra 5 defense because they need it, I guess. Flying units get 5 extra res, which allows them to be a really strong mixed tank with +10 res during Ether. I've been running Ike with Dragon Rider Lapis, and her defenses are strong enough to easily tank archers and mages without much trouble. So I assume other flyers would likely be able to do something similar since Lapis doesn't have that good defense anyways. Depending on what enemies you're facing, Ike gets access to several weapons for any situation. The hammer gives him armor effectiveness, which I like to use with Ether against armies of Great Knights in armor for effective damage. It's important to note that this hammer is a smash weapon, which is different from a normal hammer, meaning it allows enemies to always attack first, though it gains the ability to push opponents around and move them off of problematic tiles. And with defense as high as Ike's, who gives a shit if you get hit anyways? Urvan is a high might axe that also gives 3 res, which is great if you need to tank a few extra mages. Ragnall gives you a 1 to 2 range physical sword and 5 defense. Not quite as strong as the Binding Blade, but it's arguably on a better emblem. Ike's final 2 inheritable skills work really well with his kit and with many others as well. Wrath gives you 1 extra crit per HP lost, so as your health whittles down you can dish out more pain, and you get it free on Engage too. Axe Power gives you a nice 10 attack buff at the loss of a void, and since you aren't avoiding anything with Ike, you may as well inherit it for the extra damage. I'm putting Ike in S tier. He is one of those emblem rings I find myself planning strategies around when I play. he gets enough defense buffs to make any unit extremely tanky, and his res buffs plus the 50% damage reduction is nothing to sneeze at either. Get him away around pair-up damage, and no one is hurt. Plus, every part of his kit works so well together, letting you stack up so many buffs with basically no effort. Compared to other defensive emblems like Leif, he's completely blowing the competition out of the water. No one can do what I can do. Next, let's talk Byleth. We'll rip the band-aid off again. You guys all know Byleth is an S tier, and it's entirely because of Goddess Dance. With Goddess Dance, Byleth can allow 4 units to move an extra move. Get a few people with Canto Plus to help position themselves, and this ability becomes incredibly powerful. Even if it was just the dance, it would still be broken. But Byleth also grants a stat boost to the units he dances for some reason. Dragon units grant +3 to all stats, which is very broken. Backups give strength +4, cavalry gives dex +10, covert gives speed +5, armor gives defense +5, flying gives res +5, mystical gives magic +4, and Qui Adepts give luck +10. So pick what you most need, or give it to Allier for a little bit of everything. Of course, you can only use Goddess Dance once, since it is Byleth's engage attack. After Byleth had danced, he can spend his turns using the Instruct command instead. This grants stat bonuses to everyone around him in an identical way to the dance. Seriously, they have the same stats for the same unit types, don't make me read them again. Byleth also gets a lot of weapons. In fact, his first weapon slot changes depending on what type of unit is using Byleth. Backup units get Blutgang, a sword that is effective on dragon and cavalry units and also deals magic damage. Cavalry units get Eridvar, a lance that gives 50% might on combat initiation. Covert units get Failmonth, a bow that is effective on dragon units and grants 20 avoid. Armor units get the Aegis Shield, which grants 6 defense and res and has a chance to have your damage based on the unit's dexterity. Luin is a lance given to flying units that increases damage based on speed and grants dragon effectiveness. Mystical units get Thyrsus, a staff that grants 2 magic range and may have your damage. Qui Adept gets the Raphael Gem, an item that makes you immune to effective damage and critical hits. Note that Qui Adept units cannot take effective damage and has a chance of having damage. I don't know why they gave them that. It doesn't make sense to me. Can you use it on other units or something? I don't know. Dragon units ironically get the Axe Ymir, which is effective against dragons and acts as a smash weapon. Oh, and that's only the first weapon slot. Though luckily, the last 2 weapons are the same regardless of class, lucky for me and my voice. Vajra Mushti is a combat art weapon that always deals damage using the lowest of the enemy's defense or res, which makes it really good on enemy armor units or other units who have extremes in either stat. However, combat art weapons calculate damage based on an average of your strength and magic, so unless a unit's stats are well balanced, one of them will be dragging the damage down. Yes, all combat arts do this. No, it doesn't really tell you that anywhere in the game. Byleth's final weapon is the Sword of the Creator, a 1-2 range weapon that damages off strength, but gives extra damage for the unit's magic, and is effective on dragons. It's more offensively oriented than the Binding Blade or Ragnell due to that bonus damage, but has lower might than both of them, and lots of units don't have the magic to get much off of the extra damage and would prefer the defensive bonuses. All of these weapons are good and can be really useful if you happen to get a weapon that your class can't usually use. And compared to a lot of engaged weapons, they actually have the stats to be useful long term. After that, Byleth doesn't really get much. Divine Pulse may turn a missed attack into a hit based on luck, and he gets luck +12 for 3000 SP to help units make use of that and other luck-based skills. Art Focus gives hit at the cost of dodge, which is fine but not worth a skill slot. Lost and Found gives you a chance to gain extra support points with an ally based on luck. It's strictly inferior to a similar ability Corrin can give, but you could always run them both if you wanted to get supports really fast, I guess. Byleth gives swords and arts for proficiencies, and neither of those are in really high demand, even though he's only one of 2 emblems who gives arts, because the second emblem gives them much easier. But despite the rest of his skill being lackluster, Goddess Dance is so broken and centralizing that Byleth has to be an S tier. Corrin is easily one of my most hated Fire Emblem characters, but after this game I might have to change my mind. Her main strength is Dragon Bane, skill that changes what it does depending on the class. Time for another long list, everyone. Backup units create stone pillars around them, which increase the unit's defense and res. Perfect for giving your tanks a little boost. Cavalry create water tiles in a really awkward to use pattern that decreases avoid, and I don't like it very much. Covert units, on the other hand, have one of the best uses, creating fog that increases avoid and stacks with forests and fort bonuses, which, oh my god, that's insane. Armored units throw out vines that give your units break immunity, which is cool if you have high defense units that aren't armor already, but I'd usually rather take the stone tile or fog boost. Flying units create an area of glowing light that heals all your units, which is great if you just want to top everyone off when your next turn starts. Mystical units throw out some flames, like Roy, but without the boy. We adepts create ice pillar obstructions in a large area, which is amazing for corralling enemies around. All of these abilities can be used to remove miasma or fire tiles, except for the fire one, which can't remove fire, obviously, allowing you to get around some of the more difficult terrain that the enemy can throw at you. And dragon units, well, they just get to pick whichever one they want. Yeah, no, that's okay. With a dragon unit, you can go ahead and use any power you could possibly want at any time, allowing for a versatile application of these abilities depending on your current situation. This makes Corrin insanely adaptable, and with a dancer, you can even stack multiple dragon veins like the defense tiles and healing at the same time. Corrin also gets the incredibly useful Dreadful Aura as an engage skill. This means that while you are engaged with Corrin, any enemy you attack cannot move, and the effect spreads to all units within one tile of the enemy. This is absolutely amazing crowd control and pairs really well with the Sing skill Draconic Hex, which inflicts -4 to every single one of the unit's stats after combat, rendering them dead in the water. Those penalties don't even fully go away on the next turn, and instead shrink by 1 each turn until they're back at 0. And all of these debuffs work really well with Corrin's emblem attack, Torrential Roar. Torrential Roar attacks 3 squares in front of Corrin, and turns those spaces into water tiles that drop the enemy's avoid. It also counts as combat, and will apply those debuffs and Draconic Hex and Dreadful Aura to each enemy in the line. And on a dragon unit, it gets +1 range. So dragon units get a 4 range super debuff attack and access to every dragon vein bonus. Seems fair to me. Corrin also has some decent inheritables. HP plus 15 is nothing to scoff at. Quality Time Plus is amazing for support building, but is honestly amazing in combat as well. It heals everyone around you after an action, which means it pairs really well with dancers, Canto units, healers, and of course your Dragon Vein user. Sword Focus is fine, Pair Up is amazing and works well with Corrin or inherited onto others. The only thing that can stop your dodge tanking with Fog are chain attacks from enemy backup units, and this makes you immune to that. Stick it on your tanks, on units you want to protect with Lucina, or on units running Ike, and all of them basically stop worrying about their biggest weakness. Corrin's weapons are good, sure, she's sword locked, but the dual katana, like the Lance Reaver, makes weapon triangle hurt a lot less. The Wakizashi is a 2-range sword, and though it can't hit at 1 range, it often makes applying those debuffs a lot safer for units that don't have any ranged options. The Yato is a beat stick with decent stats, but no effective damage or stat buffs to make it special, so it's probably her least interesting weapon. Regardless, Corrin is joining the others in S tier. Everyone is talking about avoid stacking with Fog, but I think that's just the easiest of her tools to use at a glance. Between debuffs and all of her other Dragon Vein buffs, she has a shit ton of options, and it's only a matter of time before someone finds something else broken. Basically, if Byleth was amazing due to one specific thing and just kind of okay everywhere else, Corrin is the queen of versatility, with a kit that allows for a lot of creativity that can fit many teams in different ways. S tier, S tier, S tier. Now let's take a break from all of these amazingly powerful emblems to talk about Eirika! Eirika's gimmick is that she can use night and day to switch places with Ephraim, and vice versa. Eirika's Lunar Brace increases damage based on 20% of the foe's defense, 30% at max level, with Ephraim's Solar Brace healing 30% of damage dealt, 50% on max level. The problem with both of these skills is they only apply on player phase. If you wanted to, say, use Ephraim's Solar Brace to tank hits and heal back up, you can't. These abilities are fine, but just don't feel very strong compared to what you get out of most emblems. When you engage, you get the Eclipse Brace, which gives you both abilities at once. It does feel a lot stronger this way, but the player phase nature of these abilities still hold them back a lot, and they just feel really underpowered compared to what you get from other rings. You can also inherit Lunar Brace, and if you do, the units you inherited on will switch between the two abilities when the twins switch. Not being able to switch on demand for the units who inherit it sucks, since they aren't always in situations where they want the same ability active as the unit with the ring. They're really expensive to inherit too, costing 5,000 SP for the upgraded version. Then you have Gentility and Bravery, two sync skills that are also inheritable. Just like with the braces, Night and Day switches Gentility and Bravery. The problem with these skills is that they don't synergize with Lunar and Solar Brace. Gentility, which decreases damage received by 3, 5 at max, is active alongside Lunar Brace, which increases damage. And Bravery, which increases damage by 3, 5 at max, is active alongside Solar Brace, which heals you. Solar and Bravery work together okay, but Gentility and Lunar are completely mismatched and don't play into each other's strengths. You can sort of fix that by engaging, which gives you Blue Skies, a skill that gives you both effects at once, but needing to engage to have passives that feel strong sucks. Eirika also wastes her primary sync slot on Night and Day, which lets you switch but doesn't do anything else. I think some kind of passive would have been nice to attach to this ability to help her feel a lot less underpowered. Her engaged skill, Sigurd Twins, is another wasted slot, as it just merges the skills Eclipse, Brace, and Blue Sky when engaged. Like, couldn't we at least have had Night and Day and Sigurd Twins be one skill, giving us a free slot for something better? The twins genuinely feel short on skills compared to the other emblems because of this. Finally, we get to the engage attack Twin Strike. The unit engaged with Eirika will attack with a sword, while Ephraim helps out with the lance. I think it'd be nice if you could choose to perform this attack with a sword or lance so you can defend with different weapons afterward, and so that, the lance attack could scale with might since Ephraim seems to be stuck with... I don't know where it calculates the might for his lance, but he's stuck with something. It's not the end of the world, though. Most of the time, there's just a 2-hit attack and won't be too much crazier than doubling an enemy normally. However, the ability does do effective damage on Corrupted with both hits. And like with Seraphim, being effective on Corrupted means being effective on most enemies in the game. Because of that, this ability will kill most of the time when you use it, and it feels pretty strong. When equipped to a dragon, it gets an extra 20% damage on both hits. When equipping this ring to cavalry, you add 50% more damage to Ephraim's attack. Again, I have no idea though how Ephraim's attack is actually calculated. What lance do they use? What are Ephraim's stats? Are they identical to my stats? A lot of questions here. When it comes to inheritable skills, we once again end up underpowered. Lance Agility giving you a void in exchange for crit can be situationally strong, sure, but dodge plus 30 is doo-doo. In case you aren't aware, dodge and avoid are actually different stats in Fire Emblem. While avoid allows you to be harder to hit with attacks, dodge only decreases the enemy critical rate. Yeah, no. Decreased enemy crit honestly sucks so bad. You'd only want this if an enemy is running a killer weapon or something, and most of the time, you wouldn't want to waste one of your 2 skill slots on this instead of just playing around the killer weapon on the map. You can also just run defense to decrease crit damage and also decrease the damage of everything else. So dodge is really, really bad. Proficiency-wise, you get swords and lances, but why get lances from Eirika when you can get them from Sigurd alongside useful skills like Canto? Weapons are actually the only place where Eirika shines. You get the rapier, which is exactly the same as Marth's and a little weaker than Lucina's. By the time you get Eirika, this thing feels like it's falling off in terms of damage output, but dealing effective damage to cavalry and armor is still pretty strong. Next, we get the Wind Sword, a magic-based 2-range sword. This weapon is saved by its flying effectiveness, which means even physical units can use it to deal decent damage to enemy flyers. Sure, they'd rather have a bow, but if this is what's available, it could be worse. Her best weapon by far is Siege Lind. Its stats are solid, and it deals pretty insane damage due to being effective on Corrupted. For having a physical weapon that gives you Corrupted effectiveness is insane. There are plenty of maps that give you effective damage on every enemy on the map, which means you're doing triple damage to everything you hit. I genuinely think this weapon saves Eirika's entire kit from being trashed, and running her just for Siege Lind is kind of good. Due to Siege Lind, I'm putting Eirika in C tier, but without it, I'd have put her in a tier below Marth. Most of her kit is bad. There's nothing you want to inherit from her either. Maybe giving your entire army Blue Sky as an Eclipse race when you engage could be good, but they're such expensive skills to inherit, and it feels so much weaker than other Emblem skills. I love Eirika, and I love Sacred Stones, but they did her dirty with this one. Okay, spoiler warning once again. Seriously, if you haven't finished the game, click off now. I'm about to reveal the secret 13th emblem. Okay, now that those losers who couldn't beat a video game as soon as it came out are gone, us real gamers can talk about Allier. Allier gives special engaged skills to each unit based on support level as they have no bond level. This means that a lot of your army is likely getting access to at least bond level 10 or B supports right when you get Allier, potentially even A. Allier has no inheritable skills, though they do give sword and art proficiency, sword with B and art support with A, which I feel really invalidates the other emblems who give those proficiencies. Sorry, Byleth. Allier also engages with Engage Plus, which works differently from a normal Engage. Only Allier needs to have Engage energy, and they cause both units to engage with it. This means that units who tend to engage early, like Lyn, Ike, or Byleth, are good targets for Engage Plus, as you can give them a second Engage after they burst through it. Though sometimes they would rather get a second Engage with their primary Engage emblem, but you know. Allier can't engage with their emblem, or they will use up their Engage energy. But they could still use sync skills from their equipped emblem, just not engage skills, so it's worth it to pick one with good passives. Allier's first sync skill is Holy Aura. This grants Allier and the synced unit effective damage to Fell Dragon. I like to specify that even though this is listed as a sync skill, Allier does not get access to it or other sync skills until they engage plus. I know. It doesn't make any sense for the terminology that has already been established. But here we fucking are! Effective damage to Fell Dragons basically just means the final boss. That's it. It also grants this upgrade to every unit who has dragon effective weapons, like all the Falchians running around. Great way to one-shot the final boss, I guess, but this is basically a pointless ability most of the time. The Engage skill Attuned is the first real skill Allier gets. When you kill an enemy, the partner you are engaged with gets +4 to all stats. Then, your partner gets a kill and drops that effect back on Allier. You do have to initiate combat for this to work, so you only get this on player phase, but this is basically Speed Taker but for all stats and with double the potency. Unlike Speed Taker though, you can't use it outside of Engage Plus, which means you have 3 to 4 turns to get your stats as high as possible. I also tested, and you do lose the stat boost after Engage runs out. Attuned can also give slightly higher boosts to specific stats, and those boosts are based on the class that the unit is who gets Attuned. It's +2 in whichever stat matches with Byleth's Instruct, so I'm not going to read them all out for you, but that's basically how that works. You'll get +6 in that specific stat. It feels really strong to me. The stat boosts you get are crazy even if they're pretty temporary. As an engage attack, Allier gets Dragon Blast. This is a 2-hit attack where the second hit is a magical beam. The damage is okay, but really feels strong if you use it next to your engaged partner. Doing so gives you Bond Blast, allowing you to attack together. It becomes a 3-hit attack with the third hit still being magic, but appears to deal damage based on both unit stats, which is great since Allier's magic is awful. I'm not sure if it calculates the magic by adding them together or if they average, but the damage numbers feel high enough compared to Dragon Blast that I'm leaning towards adding them together. Of note is that both units get access to the engage attack, which means that you can use Dragon Blast or Bond Blast twice in one engage. Backup units also get a strength buff to the sword attacks, while mystical units get a magic buff to the magic attacks, just to make those a little bit stronger. Bond Forger is another sync skill that's really an emblem skill that Allier gets with C-rank supports. It gives 20 hit and avoid to all units with an emblem ring within 2 spaces of Allier or their partner. At A rank, you get the stronger version for 30 hit and avoid. This is just free extra avoid to stack on someone for being near Allier, and the hit isn't bad either. The range could be a little larger, but it's solid nonetheless. At A support, you get Holy Shield, making the unit immune to effective damage. Great for protecting your flyers from bows or protecting Great Knights from everything, but doesn't feel game-breaking since it can't be inherited and is limited to your engaged turns. If you have an S support, you get 1 extra sync skill, which again is really an engage skill. I really don't like this because I usually choose not to S support at the end of a Fire Emblem game, and I don't like missing a buff for that, but oh well. The ability grants you extra crit and dodge equal to 2 times the number of allies who have acted this turn. So let's say your deployment limit is 12. In that case, Allier and your synced ally would both get 20 crit, as 10 allies will have moved first, and the unit who goes second gets 22 crit. The sizable bonus for sure, but encouraged you to use these units last, and often leads to a really inflexible strategy. It also gets notably weaker on maps with low deployment slots, which is a lot of maps in this game. Finally, let's talk weapons. Allier does get 3 engaged weapons, the first of which is Luration. After the unit kills with a sword, all of their nearby allies get some engage energy back. Great for helping get a second engage in a lot of levels. The second weapon is Dragon's Fists, a magic-based art weapon. This is trash on Allier, but is good if you choose to engage plus with a magic unit. Since art weapons usually average your strength and magic, while this uses just magic, it may be good on many units who normally wouldn't want arts. But with no other real special effects, it isn't all that strong at the end of the day. Lastly, you have Oligulda. That one, a sword that deals effective damage on Corrupted. Like Siegeland, this thing is busted, as effective damage on Corrupted is busted. Doesn't do anything else, but it doesn't need to. I think Allier is probably A or B tier, and I'm kind of going with B. It might seem weird considering how strong a lot of these abilities are, but there's one major flaw that makes Allier feel weak. If Allier uses Engage Plus, they're not using their normal Engage, and as we've gone over, most of the rings in this game get pretty strong buffs if Allier is using them. That means there's a ton of competition here for Allier's slot, and this fact that you can't run Engage Plus without Allier means that Engage Plus isn't always as strong as a lot of your other options. Allier also needs to be next to their partner to engage, which makes it a lot harder to use than a normal engage. After you've used Allier, there's no way to disengage your units or preview the calculations without rewinding time. This makes it really hard to plan around what your second unit is going to do after Allier engages. You also don't get any passives outside of engaging, which makes sense, but it still feels a little weak, and you lose your equipped emblem's passive when you engage plus, making it the only engage that takes away skills. Allier also overwrites stat buffs from engage rings with his own. He gives 4 speed, 4 defense, and 15 HP at max bond, which is good, but losing strength from Roy or Ike or magic from Celica can sometimes feel really bad. Allier is just a little inconvenient due to their unique emblem mechanics, even if their abilities are pretty strong. So B tier feels fair. And that brings us to the end of the video. Here's the final list. I think this list represents not only what people have figured out and what feels strong right now, but also emblems that have strong potential for experimentation in the future. But if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe, give me a like. I'm working on a character ranking, which is going to come out soon. I'm played through the game 3 times, so I can use the entire cast to make that character ranking as accurate as possible. So that's coming soon, going to be great. All right, see you later.